All right, everyone, we are just a minute past the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started here. First off, my name is Gabe Prado and just wanted to welcome you to our webinar, Delivering Quick Digital Wins in Power Gen with DataOps on behalf of both myself and Jonas. We'll do some formal introductions here in a second, but first wanted to kind of lay out a few housekeeping items. First, we will be recording this webinar and we'll distribute it by the end of the week. And then second, we've left some time at the end for Q&A. So if you have a question that comes up, go ahead and put it in the questions bar in your webinar panel, and we'll do our best to address it at the end of the session. So again, welcome and thank you for spending some time with us today. A little bit about my background. So I'm actually the director of product marketing for power and utilities here at Cognite. I've got a background in industrial test and measurement back in National Instruments, specifically working on data acquisition systems, and then most recently spent some time working with AI and machine learning software for power gen as well as oil and gas. So what's been kind of interesting has been seeing the data acquisition side as well as the advanced analytics side. And one of the reasons I joined Cognite not too long ago was really to help customers bridge this gap between data and the use of data. And that's really what we're all about here at Cognite. So go ahead and kind of hand it over to Jonas for a quick introduction on his end as well.
Hi, I'm Jonas. Thanks for listening. I've been in Cognite for 4 months now, and before that, I was in a mid-sized Norwegian hydropower company called Glitre Energi for a little more than 12 years. And it's one of those beautiful companies where you get to know a little bit about everything, at least when you stay as long as 12 years. So I've been having a position as a production planner, been working with maintenance strategy, and for the last couple of years, I had the responsibility for digitalizing the company and R&D. So I will give you a presentation on some use cases we've been working on within this industry for the last year, just a little later on. So from that, I think you can take it away, Gabe.
Great. All right, well, yeah, on behalf of both of us, welcome to the webinar. We're excited to spend some time with you today. So just kind of, we kind of went through some introductions. I'll spend just a minute or so on Cognite if you're not familiar with us. We'll spend a little bit of time on the power gen digital app landscape and kind of go into some of the problems that we're starting to see from our customers and kind of in this landscape. And then kind of like Jonas mentioned, we've got some really great stories to share with you guys about customers, what's real, what's on the roadmap, and it's all centers around this concept of data ops, which might be a new term for you, but is something that we'd like to kind of cover here during the webinar. And then towards the end, we'll spend some time on Q&A. So if you're not familiar with Cognite, Cognite is a global data management software company based out of Oslo, Norway. As you can kind of see there on the map, we do have locations and offices around the world and try our best to be as close to the customer projects as possible. We're a little bit different from other AI or other data management startups. We come from industry. We were born from the problems that present themselves in scaling and operationalizing data. So we're really familiar from a subject matter expertise perspective and have been working with these industrial problems since our inception. You kind of see a handful of our customers there at the bottom. Heavy experience in oil and gas, and it's been interesting to be able to translate all of those learnings from oil and gas into other key verticals that are facing very similar challenges like power generation, manufacturing, and a whole host of other verticals. At a very, very basic level, what we try to do with data is collect it, connect it to the systems and the people that need it the most, operationalize these data management systems, and then help people scale through a concept that we call DataOps and service through a product called Cognite Data Fusion. Now, again, this slide shouldn't have any crazy information. I think most of the industry is pretty well understanding of the 4Ds, right, and the amount of change that is presenting to the industry, right? Decarbonization, decentralization, deregulation. There's another D that I'll talk about in a little bit. But essentially what this means for our operations is that we're constantly having to adapt to new patterns of behavior. And the you kind of see this manifest itself in different ways. So from a demand and supply side, right, you've seen a pretty dramatic shift in what energy is needing to serve the market with the advent of renewables. The energy mix is changing, which means that operations downstream have to be more dynamic to fit those dynamic demand patterns. Just another good example that's kind of happening right now with COVID and the changing dynamics of where we work. It means that the commercial energy demand has changed as well. So again, a lot of change from these new factors in the market. Another key bucket of change that we're seeing is with aging infrastructure systems and tools, right? So I've seen this kind of firsthand in the U.S. We have infrastructure that is aging, and not only in these late life cycle assets, not only is the need to predict maintenance needs and to prevent failure, not only does that get more important, but it also gets harder to capture, right? I like to use an analogy of my car. My car doesn't operate the same way after 100,000 miles as it did at 10,000 miles. And I need to be able to track what normal looks like over the course of that entire life cycle of owning that car. The same is true for our industrial, our critical rotating assets, right? Normal looks different, and we need better ways to capture what normal looks like. And then another factor here is just the impact of knowledge drain and workforce shifts, right? We have a lot of folks that are retiring, a lot of skilled labor that is leaving the field, and this is another dynamic to capture. How do we make sure that our operations can continue to go uninterrupted in the face of different pressures from a workforce perspective? Now, this is really where that fourth D comes into place, right? Digitalization. And this has been going on for a while, but at Cognite, we really see this as the best means to adapt to this change and sustainably deliver solutions for these challenges. Now, what I find interesting about this is it's right in the middle of our operational objectives, right? By being able to bridge the gap of these forced changes and using digitalization to capture value and actually change how we work and how we forecast out, or how do we manage outages, how we improve the workflows that exist currently. It's digitalization falls right in the middle, and we can map that all the way back to business outcomes, right? So I think everyone in PowerGen shares a common set of business outcomes around capacity factor, HSE, predicting the residual life of assets and extending that as long as possible. I think there are some, digitalization is really at the heart of all of this. Now, kind of digging into this just a little bit deeper, we've kind of approached digitalization from a data acquisition perspective, and now really from an application perspective, right? We have the data in many cases, and we're looking to operationalize it and actually drive value to the business through more and more digital applications. So there's a handful here around remote inspection, digital worker, AI modeling, labor optimization. There's a whole handful. Some of that is developed in-house, some of that is developed externally. And I think a lot of organizations are starting to grapple with how they approach the value from digital apps in their organization. Now, I like to look at this in a slightly different way, right? So I kind of like to lay this out in terms of how this collection of applications can really drive different levels of business value. So, because the reality is that everyone is in different stages of their digital transformation, resource allocation is different, right? So, there is a learning curve with digital transformation. So, while what I present in this next slide doesn't necessarily have to be accomplished in order, it is an interesting framework to be able to kind of build on your applications to really drive the most value. So the bucket on the left is really around data operationalization. Let's take the data that we have today and make better use of it, right? A good example here is just being able to kind of do some basic asset health and risk monitoring, right? When you can put your data into a dashboard, you can put your data in front of the SME in a more effective manner, they can make better decisions. And then you can start to layer on additional data sources like PNIDs and start to add more context to those decisions. We've got a use case about how we were able to help a customer really start to make better decisions around turbine startups that we'll share a little bit later. So again, kind of a fundamental and really important means to start using data. Now, what I think a lot of folks are also starting to really get involved with and wrap their heads around are on these means to optimize workflows. Once you can make better decisions, you can start to optimize the workflows that you do that you use to address maintenance or planning. And this is where you can start moving away from a scheduled approach to everything to being way more on demand, and facilitate better communication between your ops teams, your SMEs, the maintenance crews, all these people that are involved in actually activating the decisions that are made in the first stage. Right, and the big value here is improved quality of repairs and work and the efficiency. We have a case with Aker BP, which is in oil and gas, where they're actually able to kind of reimagine how they did their work. They were able to foster more collaboration with our DataOps platform and actually reduce their task times by 50 to 80%, really freeing them up to work on their maintenance backlog and to start working on the really high priority tasks that had been shelved. Now, kind of this last bucket is really around smart automation, right? So once you've got your data and your workflows really tuned in, the next level is in automating this outside of the box, right? So if you think about starting to implement robotic inspections on parts of your process that are very hard or costly or prohibitive or unsafe to inspect, this is where robotics plays a bigger role, right? And then you can also start to tie in additional spare parts and inventory management, right? So you can start bringing in or ordering parts and forecasting parts more and more effectively. And some of the big goals here are really around maximizing HSE and reducing some of those O&M expenses and helping your entire team do their best work. Now, what I find really interesting about this is that there are different pieces of the technology stack that are really relevant for each level of this ladder. On one hand, you have data extraction and pipelining and contextualization that's really critical for data operationalization. As you move up the ladder, physical models, digital twins, machine learning, NLP, that becomes way more important, and the needs of the data needs for those pieces of the technology change. And then you get into advanced data science and logistical models as you move into this more focus on automation. So there's a lot of different pieces of this technology stack that that not every data architecture is set up to handle well. And there is a really big there are some stories that we're starting to see from our customers that how you deploy digital really matters. Now, this might be pretty obvious, but it's worth unpacking some of the problems that exist here, right? The reality of our situation is that we live in a world of data silos, right? There's IT data, there's OT data, you have your different governance systems, you have your different teams, you have your different access privileges in all of these different silos. And that makes it really complicated just to get data, right? And if that's step number one, how do we start to think about getting data from all of these different silos? The other trend that's really emerging is that we have this expanding need for using data, right? We have more data consumers than ever. And this is your business analyst, this is your subject matter expert, this is your manager, this is your citizen data scientist and data scientist. These roles are really emerging in operations to make better decisions and drive towards those operational goals. And kind of the other reality is it's still very complex to operationalize data even in a dashboard. Sometimes there's a project kickoff process, there's many stakeholders involved, there's a lot of back and forth. The reality is that even for simple visualizations, in many cases, it can be very complicated to achieve. And I don't know how you guys are experiencing this or not, but we're starting to see more customers kind of come up with challenges in their digital transformation, whether it's a stall, whether it's less ROI than they were expecting, and it tends to focus around four main buckets. While in some cases they may be working with vendors directly, the reality is that vendors want to protect the data and the work that they've done. So they have this inherent need to lock in their output, not necessarily make it easily integratable to other users or other systems. And so you have more data silos being created. The other thing is if data is hard to get and you can't necessarily trust or verify the source of the data all the time, you lose that trust in data quality. And that's a really sticky situation because you've invested lots of time and effort in creating data. But if there's a lack of transparency to the user, you don't necessarily have that trust, and that data may not, or the applications and the data may not actually be adopted into a meaningful workflow. Another thing that I saw all the time in my experience as a machine learning vendor was that a lot of times deploying models takes a long time, right? And if we're trying to keep up with a evolving asset lifecycle, you may not deploy that machine learning model to predict the behavior in time for that behavior to be relevant, right? You may have already moved to another phase. So the shorter and more dynamically you can deploy machine learning models or hybrid AI models or digital twins, the more effective that process becomes, the better you're equipped to actually derive value out of it. And then kind of spending a little bit of time on this also, if all of these issues aren't necessarily addressed with the right data architecture, with the right data platforms, these problems tend to scale with your business, right? You might be heavily invested in digital transformation and really working on all of these things, but if you're not addressing the root cause of data contextualization, data access, and availability, it's really easy for these problems to grow in your organization. And this means that you might have to add more humans, which directly impacts the ROI from your digital transformation efforts. And the human costs might outpace the digitalization costs. You also have low adoption, right? You can spend a lot of time and money creating an application, but if it's not used because it's not user friendly or it's not on demand enough, you don't necessarily get that adoption that you're banking on. And all of this kind of manifests itself into competitive advantage. If you're in a competitive market, time is everything, and the faster that you deploy these digital applications and start getting value, give you that edge over other companies. So, there's this emerging concept of DataOps. Now, this might be a new term to you guys, but it is really around it's a data management practice that's really focused on improving the communication, integration, and automation of data flows between data managers and consumers across an organization. So the whole purpose of DataOps is to facilitate more collaboration between the data silos, the data application development, and the end users to really to drive value in your organization. And some of the problems that are being solved with DataOps are really around bridging this OT and IT gap, right? We see convergence more and more every single day, but there's still some pretty big divides, right? In terms of ownership, governance, and DataOps helps facilitate that connection between OT and IT data. We talked about data quality earlier. DataOps is directly correlated to improving data quality for your end users. Accelerating innovation, bridging gaps between IT and data science, enabling scaling within your organization, and then also reducing some of the expenses and improving the success rate of your digital projects. So that's kind of DataOps in a nutshell. We have more content on this on our website, and we do DataOps deep dives, webinars that we can introduce you to as well. But this is a really important emerging data category that to be aware of. Now at Cognite, this is where we use DataOps and we package it for our organizations or for our customers in a product called Cognite Data Fusion. And this is a kind of a high-level overview of how we're bridging the gap between IT and OT data. You see the different data sources there on the bottom left, hierarchy data, ERP data, other tabular data, and all the operational data that we're familiar with, time series, 3D data, IoT logs. And in Cognite Data Fusion, our DataOps platform, we integrate and contextualize this data together so that it's meaningful for those consumers, right? A good example of this contextualization is really just deriving meaning between these different data sources and finding the relationships that matter. So a good example here is it's one thing to look at one asset in a production workflow and be able to predict the asset failure for that workflow. But it's just as important to look at the inputs and outputs. What's happening upstream, what's happening downstream, and look at things in terms of an entire asset hierarchy. Now, CDF helps you do the mapping, the tag mapping, the asset mapping, establishing those asset hierarchies so that you can get that visibility across an entire workflow. And that's some of the beauty of finding these relationships that matter in this whole world of data and bringing it and serving it to the data consumers at your organization. Now, the other critical thing here is that as DataOps becomes more adopted, the impetus is really to shift the focus back to the business problems. So one example here is really another predictive maintenance example. Let's say we're creating a model for a generator, a predictive model for a generator. The typical means to develop this is to spend a lot of time in the data, right? Finding the data, finding the tags that matter, cleaning the data. There's a lot of overhead that goes into just preparing the data for modeling. And then in modeling, you have additional complexity, right? You have to operationalize the model, you have to connect it to a live data stream, you have to protect the integrity of that data. And this is another set of challenges, right? And then at the app layer, obviously issues with authorization and graphing and interactivity. So the effort is really weighted on this data capture and data access issue. Now with DataOps and with CDF, we're trying to flip this on its head, right? We want the users at the organization to be able to spend their time on the business problem and less time on the really tedious tasks of dealing with data and operationalizing the models and hosting the models, and provide more of an out-of-box experience so that the insights can get to the user that needs the most and the app can be developed in a meaningful time. Again, whether you develop the app or a partner develops the app, by establishing the data pipelines and the data contextualization, we enable those users to make best usage of their time and the data that's available. So I kind of walked through some stuff at a high level, but it really makes a difference to be able to show this kind of in action. So I'm going to hand it over to Jonas to spend some time on where we've helped customers and then plant somewhat of a vision for what can actually be realistically achieved in a short time frame with CDF that you guys can take back to your organizations.
Okay, thanks a lot, Gabe. Yeah, I will show some use cases we've been working on for the last year using DataOps and CDF. And I would love to start out with a use case we've done for the second largest power producer in or hydropower producer in Norway called Eco. And you know, working in this industry, we work with the most beautiful equipment out there. These hydropower machinery is very well designed, is durable, and it just lasts and lasts and lasts. And you should probably know also that the tolerance of a hydropower turbine outperforms the tolerance of a Rolex watch by far. However, most of these machines were designed during the 50s, 60s, 70s, and the 80s, and they were designed for much more steady state operations compared to what we see today in a more fluctuating market, which again implies a lot more frequent start and stops. So the influence of the starts and stops has been a huge focus, at least in Norway, for the last 10 years. What's the consequences of this change in operations? Will it affect the remaining useful lifetime? And there's been a lot of research on that topic without the clear conclusion. However, we know that it tears the tear and wear of the equipment has been or is increasing when you start and stop much more frequently. So what we've done in this case is that we have extracted data from the control system, and we looked specifically into the start and stop sequences itself. And take for instance a stop sequence. It will again consist of a set of subsequences. So what we've done is that we are monitoring each subsequence with respect to time, so we can see how the subsequences develop from stop to stop, and if there's changes in the time duration of these different sequences, you get some kind of a warning that there's something going on. So this is a way of doing condition monitoring on the equipment. And these applications has also been used for failure search when the start or stop sequence do not act as it should. So yeah, we see that condition monitoring cases like this has a huge potential in today's market. Moving on to the next one. This one is more related to anomaly detection. It's from the oil and gas industry, and Wintershall had some issues with their shutdown sequences on the gas turbines on the oil rig platform at the North Sea called Middelplatte. And this oil rig gets its electricity supplies from gas turbines and also from cables connected to shore. However, the gas turbine electricity is much cheaper than the cable electricity. So it's really important to monitor these gas turbines. And again, they experienced some issues for the shutdown sequences, so they wanted to do some anomaly detection, including a set of sensors in a multivariate analysis. So we trained model and we applied a random forest approach for this in order to give again early warnings on anomalies, such that when they had abnormal shutdowns, they could notify engineers and operators such that they could go out there and prepare the machine for startup again by doing adjustments or even repairs. And in this case, we extracted data from the control systems, and we also merged that data together with the work order data from the maintenance systems. So that's like a really nice example of contextualizing data across different data silos. And we're kind of seeing 5 digital wins that can be accelerated using like a CDF platform to collect different data sources. And like the first one is extracting data from the control systems. I'm going to tell a little bit more about that in just a minute. And then again, visualizing this data in dashboards of various forms. And stepping up from that, we can start to apply condition monitoring, which is really important in order to get the value out of the data we collect. And there's also a huge focus out there on how we can use 3D models in order to visualize data and also do all sorts of safety analysis, risk assessments, project planning, and so on. I'm going to show a little video on a project we've done with the 3D models. And the last one is also addressing a pain point throughout the industry and is related to digitizing drawings. So we'll get more into that in just a second. It all starts with getting access to the data, and this is like a common pain point across the industry, how to get the data out of the control systems. These control systems may be 2 years old, or they might be 30, even 40 years old, and different suppliers, different protocols. And what is common is that they're all of them are streaming data through a SCADA system. But if we want to do advanced analytics, we want data from its source without being worked on, or any dead bands or things like that. So we want the data straight from the control system. And here at Cognite, we have a dedicated team working with the data extraction. We have a set of extractors, and we have also experience across different industries in this field. And this is so important, and it's my experience. It's very often underestimated, the effort it needs to get this data. And of course, it's really important to have an historian in the back end to ingest this data in. So once we've got that data, we want to merge it or contextualize it with data from the maintenance system and market data, production planning data, and I want to give you a short break on the PowerPoint slides here and jump into demo. What you see on my screen now is a dashboard that we have made for Hafslund Eco on a power plant, and you're actually watching live data from that power plant right now. And it's springtime in Norway. There's a lot of snow melting up in the mountains, so we see all these machines are running almost 100%. So what we see here is data from the control systems. We have gathered data from the production planning system down here. Unfortunately, it's in Norwegian, so I have to translate. We have data from the ERP or maintenance system up here, and we also have data from the access control system. So you see that there's no people present in the power station right now. They're home eating dinner, I guess. So if we drill down a little bit, we can go into the waterway and look how that looks like. We get up a schematic like this, where you see different indicators, and this is live indicators showing the position of the gates and the valves in the waterway. And it's nice just to get a quick overview of what's going on if you want to do some work, or you just want to have a look at how thing operates. Jumping back to the dashboard, we can jump into the production plan. And this again is from another data source. Here we can go up and we can see how the different machines will run today or tomorrow or even next week if the plans are available, or we can go back in time and search how was it like a year ago. We can also press like auto refresh on here and we'll see live data coming in. up here we have data again from the maintenance system, so we can just drill down. But before that, just let us drill down on aggregate one or unit one to see how we can present data when we have it available. Here we have an infographic showing live data from the control systems. We have gathered some vibration data, some temperature measures, and some frequency measures up here. And you can just mouse over and look at the tag names and the name of the time series. And up here we have kind of the browser, I should say the Google browser, or our contextualized data. You can do a search here for a turbine or generator or control systems. And I shield a little bit, and we can press this one, which is the control system for the aggregate. And over here you see different menus. So if you press the first one there, we see the details like tag names or even vendors or serial numbers and stuff like that. And we can go into this menu, which is documents, and now we're into IFS, which is the ERP system used in this company. And we can press this one and we'll get all the related drawings and documentation for this asset. Moving on to events, we see the work orders, the failure reports, or even the alarms from the control system. And we can then press this one and drill down and get a detailed overview. And the last one here is the time series, where I can just like press this one, which is the current on the generator for phase one, and we get a quick view here, and we can do open and just search in time or get live data, or we can even export it into Power BI or Excel or whatever you want. So this is just kind of an example how we can use data once it's been collected, liberated, and contextualized. And for us, it's really important for the end users to kind of make these dashboards themselves, such that they will fulfill their needs. Okay, so let me move back to the presentation again. The next one is related to 3D models. When we're out there and talking to customers, they tend to like 3D models. They think it's exciting, but they're always asking, what should we use that for? And again, this is just a matter of being creative and see kind of a lot of possibilities, because we can use 3D models to present a lot of the time series data in a really user-friendly way, or we can use it to access data. If you contextualize the asset data in this model, you can just press the generator and you can get like data from the generator up in front. We'll show that in just a second. And it also has a lot of potential use cases when it comes again to health and safety. It's much more easy to watch a model or walk around in a model like this when you're sitting in a meeting room and doing some kind of safety analysis. And for us in Cognite, it's really important to make these models such that they can be run on a PC, a mainstream PC, or even on mobile devices. So we made a short video to demo a project we've done the last month. Well, that was a short demo of what we can do. So yeah, again, we also are investing a lot on how to use 3D models like this to do remote inspections using robotics, for instance. At least here in Norway, a lot of the power plants are located in remote areas, and it's takes a lot of time to travel out and do a lot of these weekly or just bi-weekly inspections. And we believe that we can automate a lot of that using technology like you just saw. The next one is related to drawings and contextualizing and digitizing of PNID drawings. And what you see on the screen here is from a use case we've done for an oil and gas company. And in the hydropower industry, it's drawings and documentation is a huge pain point, because you have drawings that you got from a project last year, and you have drawings that is 50, 60, and even 70, 80 years old. And you will have to manage these drawings in more or less the same system. So what we are working a lot with is to contextualize these drawings just by having like a scanned version, a PDF version of the drawings, and try to contextualize it with the data such that you can go in and you can click those yellow items or assets you see in a drawing, and you get related time series or even other related drawings or models. So I think this is also of huge value for a lot of the players out there in the industry.
Yeah, no, Jonas, thank you so much for the in-depth kind of overview of those different applications. And again, I think it's really interesting to see what is available in a short amount of time, and how DataOps and CDF can actually help you enable some really valuable insights about your operations in a condensed timeline. So I know we presented a lot of content today, but wanted to kind of leave you with a few takeaways. The first one I don't think is a huge surprise, but especially with how dynamic our operations are today, this digital change for power and utilities will continue to accelerate. Again, we see more evidence of that day to day, and it directly ties back to competitive advantage. This emerging concept of data ops really is key. It's kind of that middle layer that connects the data to the end users and really makes it contextualized and valuable, right? By unlocking data, by providing it in a structured format for use, and then enabling the operationalization of that data through applications. And what's great about this is that it doesn't only deliver long-term value, but again, you can create some of these short-term quick wins just with that access to your data. And then long-term, you're setting yourself up for an embrace of this digital transformation and acceleration of other digital applications that might have been further down your roadmap than you want, right? Start pulling those projects in to activate short-term. And then lastly, again, kind of to what we mentioned earlier, how Cognite was born from industry. This is where we'd love to provide some guidance, some governance, some help with data operations through our CDF platform. We have a track record of delivering this to a variety of industries, and really want to enable your data consumers, your organization, to be able to fully activate the value from digital transformation. And it all kind of comes back to collecting data, connecting it to the systems and the people that need it, operationalizing it, and then helping scale those digital applications in a production environment. What you can do next is request a personal value discussion and a demo. Again, the technology that Jonas showed is just the tip of the iceberg. We've worked on a lot of applications that will likely make sense for your organization. And if you want to have that initial value discussion, we recommend setting that up with us. We will also be doing a deeper dive on O&M and hydro and some of the trends and some of the future technologies that are really going to drive significant change for O&M and hydro. So stay tuned for that if that's something that you're involved with. So with that, we'll go ahead and go to questions. I've seen one trickle in or a couple trickle in already now. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll address them. So the first one that we got here is really around data silos and why that's a problem, how to get over the data silos problem. So what I think that means is how do you get data from all these different sources into a way that it can be contextualized? And what we've been able to do for this has been to build a portfolio of extractors either on our own or with partners to tap into that OSI Pi system or tap into the ERP system and actually connect directly to that data source. So it comes down to having a robust and rich portfolio of extractors or connectors that can pull the data into one centralized way for contextualization. Okay, details about a DataOps webinar. We'll send that in as part of the follow-up, so I'll make a note of that, and we'll get that out in case you want to go deeper into DataOps as a principle or as a program. We've got a question about PDFs that's a little bit unclear. So if you ask that question around PDFs, could you go ahead and maybe elaborate a little bit? Oh, I think the question is around why it's hard to digitalize PDFs, and maybe Jonas, you could take this one.
It's more like contextualizing it, like you relate the drawings and the symbols in the drawings to other kind of data sources. Because if you want to just use what should I say, at like a dead PDF and contextualize that with some kind of a tag name from the control system, you need some algorithms in between, and that's what I mean about that.
Gotcha. See another question here. So got a question around the vendor lock-in problem and how CDF kind of prevents that lock-in. This is a good question. CDF has been kind of architected to be open, right? So once we can tap in and build or have the extractor for that data source, our goal is to not lock that data down anymore, right? We want to make that available. We use CDF as an open platform and enable the developers through SDKs and other means to be able to actually use the data, right, without needing additional access on top of that. So great question, and we'll go into that in the DataOps webinar as well. Some great questions coming in. Got a question kind of around how DataOps is different from DevOps, and that's a great question. Now, I think in principle these two are relatively similar, right? Both are meant to kind of facilitate the acceleration of software application development by using common methodologies and scalable practices. I think one of the big differences here is that DataOps is really around the mobilization of data as the main pain point that it's addressing. So by doing this well, it reduces the dependencies on those really hard to find specialists and helps democratize the data availability, data access, and data to the people that use it the most. So all in all, both drive a more lean and an efficient means of developing digital applications, but DataOps is really focused on that main pain point of data access, data contextualization, and helps that way. Let's see. Got another question here around data lakes. And the question is, I already have my data in data lakes. Isn't that similar? How does that compare to DataOps? Now, it's a good question. I think what's really different here is that data lakes are important, but at the end of the day, they're just storing raw data. There's minimal contextualization or transformation occurring on that data that actually makes it useful. I think one analogy that we like to use here is, kind of like being able to find your way to a new location using just a set of coordinates, right? If you're in like a mountain area or something and you have the coordinates and you've been there before, you have an easier way to get there because you can kind of dial in and you know the context around you. But if you just have a set of coordinates and you've never been there before, it's hard to know what to prepare for or what the context is that you're going into, right? Are you going to have to cross rivers? Are you just going to, is it going to be flat? Like there's a lot of context that you're lacking. So data ops really intends to bring that context to those decisions, bring the context to the user so that they can navigate it in a more effective and practical manner. We mentioned this a little bit in the webinar, but a really practical example of this is asset hierarchy. Again, what's happening upstream, what's happening downstream of that asset, how do those factors impact the production or the availability of that particular asset, and how do you make decisions kind of more holistically that take into account all the available information? Because the reality is we're only using a small fraction of the data and information that's available because it is hard to use, it's hard to find, it's hard to map and tag. And with CDF and data ops, that information is contextualized and served in a much more meaningful manner. Great question. Well, I don't see any more questions, so maybe we'll go ahead and end in a minute or two early, but thank you all for attending. Again, we hope we were able to educate a little bit on data ops and what that is enabling specifically for power generation. We'll send out the webinar within a couple of days and more information on our DataOps webinar. So again, thank you all for attending and hope you have a great rest of the day.